All right, so as you can see from the presentation, slide 1, right? Pretty self-explanatory. This is going to be the workshop for visualizing a Shark Tank dataset with ZoomCharts, and this is going to be the part 2. If you didn't have an opportunity, my apologies, if you didn't have the opportunity to attend the first workshop, there's a link in the chat right now. Sabina can post it afterwards again, just in case somebody joined just now. There's a link in the chat where you can watch the recording for the first one. So feel free to just go through it, see what we did here, adjust your data set if it's necessary, maybe make some changes to the visuals and so forth, and get some more understanding on how things could be visualized. Today, we're going to be focusing on a few additional things, right? We're going to be focusing on and actually going through a few other things that we didn't discuss previously. So, of course, we're going to introduce you a little bit to ZoomCharts, right? What is it all about, what we do here, and so forth. Then we're going to look at the Onyx data challenge itself. We're going to go through the website just step by step so you know where to find information, just to make sure that you understand the rules and the deadlines. So we're going to talk about that and also about the ZoomCharts mini challenge. And then we're going to jump right into the report where I'm going to showcase you some of the things that I did on top of the data based on the previous experience that we had on the first workshop, and how to build, for example, things with the map visual and also the network visual and these sort of things. And then, of course, at the very end, we're going to have a Q&A section. So for the Q&A section, just going to have a quick reminder here, guys. If you want to ask a question that's tailored specifically to me, make sure that you post it in the Q&A only section. So that's going to help me to understand which are the questions that I need to go through, right? If there's something that you want to comment on, use the chat section. If there's a specific question you want to ask, paste it in the Q&A section. I'm going to try to respond to as many of them, of course, as possible. If the time is going to run out and the official, let's say 1 hour ends, right? What we're going to do is we're going to still stay in the webinar and try to go through every single question. If there are going to be any questions that we can't answer straight away, we're going to reach out to you afterwards via email. And of course, if you do have any questions that you come across afterwards, once the webinar is finished itself, right? Sabina can probably post the email as well. There's an email with webinars@zoomcharts.com. So if you do have any questions that you come across later on when you're building the report, when you're trying to adjust things, but you just cannot figure out what am I missing here, feel free to just send us an email. We'll get back to you with details on how to do this. Just whenever you do that, make sure you also provide as much information as possible for us to understand what are the ground rules for this idea itself, right? It's the same principle as always. The more information you give to the other side, the easier it is to respond to the questions. And I think, just going to type it in, webinars@zoomcharts.com. There you go. Did it simultaneously. See, that's how teamwork works. So you have a email link address right there. So if you do have any questions, just drop us an email right there. So without further ado, what is ZoomCharts? Well, ZoomCharts is a company. Actually, before we go into ZoomCharts, right? One thing I forgot also last time, and it's kind of important for some people, maybe not that much important for others, but one thing that I did forget to do is, let me just reshare the screen itself. Let's go for this one. The endless loop, always going to be there, right? So a little bit about me. My name is Aivis. I work at ZoomCharts and I'm a senior product expert here. I've been working with Power BI for a little bit over 6 years. So the day I joined ZoomCharts is basically the day I started to work with Power BI. And throughout the days, I worked a lot with community. I worked a lot with different professionals from different sizes of company. I worked with individual customers, for example, just individual users who are building the reports for their own use, or if they're trying to build something for other end users. And I worked also with large corporations where I'm teaching hundreds of customers at the same time. One of our customers, for example, is the same Microsoft. Funny enough, right? Microsoft has Power BI, but they still use our visuals. It's a great success for us, but also for them and similar organizations. I've been running different training courses just to help them out and understand not only how to utilize Power BI in general, but also how to achieve the most from our visuals. So that gives me a little bit of background and, let's say, a lot of experience from different industries, different size companies, different approaches and everything. What I also do is I try to give back to the community. So I do host a few events throughout the year in different meetup groups. One of the ones that I truly focus on is the Riga Power BI meetup group. And that's a platform that I also recommend everybody to just look into. So if you think about joining some, let's say, communities or where you can get some additional information, you can always go to, let's say, meetup.com. Probably not that interested necessarily in the Riga Power BI group, but hey, this is going to help you a lot. Let me just quickly move the window. There we go. So meetup.com is one of the websites that I recommend you to visit. It's going to allow you to find probably a closer location to yourself where you can learn about Power BI, where you can get the networking opportunities and get maybe some additional job opportunities. So it's a great resource to always use and look into. So, and based on all of that is where I gathered my experience. I learn a lot of different things. I try to understand a lot of different perspectives. And the main reason for that is because it allows me to learn a lot of different views on not only how to use, for example, our visuals, but how our visuals typically used within Power BI within different sizes of organizations. Now, as far as ZoomCharts goes, ZoomCharts is a data visualization software development company. So what we did initially is we created JavaScript SDK library, which we built up from ground up. And based on that, we started to develop custom visuals for Power BI. Currently, we have 10 different custom visuals available in the marketplace, but more are coming this year, and we're not, planning to stop anytime soon. What we do try to focus on is a couple of things. We try to stay and focus on the customizability of the charts. And one of the most important things we focus on is the user experience and data storytelling. And the reasons why we focus on this is because what we see as a trend going towards, let's say, the next few years is you're transitioning from the typical way of reporting where you started off with a report for every single question, right? If you had a question, you basically have a report for that specific question. So what we see a lot of, let's say, larger organizations trying to gravitate to is they're creating reports which allow you to start off with an overview, and then you dig down deeper into the details by asking questions through the visuals itself. And that is what we focus on. We want to give the opportunity for the users to communicate with the data, communicate with the charts by interacting with them directly, instead of using, let's say, slicers or filters or these sort of things, but actually interact with the chart to get the answers that you're looking for. And that is what we try to focus on. And whilst doing that, we also become a part of the community, right? We help a lot with the Power BI certification process. When it comes to paid visuals, we've been in the game since the very beginning. So there's a lot of hurdles that we jumped across just to kind of get here and try to bring as much power to the end user as possible. I hope that's enough. If any other questions arise, just drop me a message. I'll get back to it. So, Olatin asks, can you send a link to the community again? I didn't get that. Sure, just give me a second. Copy a link, send to everybody. Meetup.com. Let me know if you received that now. And Hajnalk asks, I can't open the sample report for this first webinar that was sent with the recording of the webinar. Are there any specific errors that you're getting, or just trying to understand what is the issue, why you cannot open it? Alternatively, if you could reach out to webinars@zoomcharts.com with the issue, we can probably help you solve it afterwards through that. All right, sorted that out. Now, regarding the challenge itself. So the challenge itself is being hosted by Onyx Data. And the challenge itself is regarding the Shark Tank dataset that they have provided us with. So Shark Tank, for those of you who maybe not know, is basically a TV reality show where different investors from different industries look at different startups, try to find an idea that they want to invest in, and it's basically a back and forth trying to pitch their ideas, get the investments, and afterwards showcase a little bit of, those success stories or failure stories, whatever it is, because life isn't always about winning, right? You get some ups and downs, and that's the way we go. Then one of the things that I wanted to quickly go through here is going to be, of course, this one, because this is one of the most important things, I think. Who can actually participate? And the event itself is meant for everybody. It doesn't matter if you have extensive experience in building reports with Power BI and you already have basic have the advanced knowledge of it with the visuals and everything. You can create the reports and you submit your ideas. And it's also tailored for those of you who are new to this. So for example, if it's your first Power BI report that you're building, don't get discouraged just by the fact that everybody is getting allowed to, participate. The reports are going to be judged on different criteria. So it's not necessarily that everybody's hitting every single box, which is why if we go a little bit downwards right here, I'm going to jump up and down from time to time, is there are 4 main criteria. So visual design, analytical skills, narration, and tech innovations. So how are you building the reports? What kind of, let's say, capabilities are you using? If there's additional text that provides context to it, are you allowing the user to interact with the visuals, or is it just basically a snapshot of these things? So all of these things going to get into consideration with getting the final result for the report. The one thing that I also want to say about these challenges is when I first started off with Power BI, for example, right, I also participated in these challenges. And one of the main reasons why I wanted to participate in them is not just because I wanted to get the prize. Getting a prize is always great, right? You get some additional cash in some cases, you get some additional gift cards or so forth, additional materials and everything. But it's also a great opportunity for everybody to get your name out there. Because if you build a report, sure, maybe the first one is not going to be that great. Okay, learn from that. See what other people are building. Because remember, at the very end of the day, everybody's getting exactly the same data set. So you can see and basically interpret what visuals are they using, what type of functionalities are they using, how are they visualizing this information, did they add any additional dimensions to the information, and so forth. So it's always a way for you to learn from the experience of others, right? Don't get discouraged just by the fact that your first report doesn't look as well polished as, for example, somebody who has been working with Power BI for 5 or 6 years, right? It's the same thing for me. When I started off and when I saw the other reports and what I was building, well, it basically looked like, there's stages for every product development. There's an MVP, and then there's the scratch version of it. So I was probably building the scratch version while other people were building the final product. So they weren't comparable, but it allowed me to just get into the environment itself, get into the community, starting to talk with people, starting to understand what visuals are available, what options are available, what functions can be used, what kind of visual design ideas can I sort of get inspiration from. Because at the end of the day, the learning curve is, it's a process that you go through. And one thing that I usually kind of can say is, for those of you who are sometimes, worried about what happens, this is one of the things that you can look into, and it's the Dunning-Kruger effect. This is one of the things that helped me get out of a slump when I was there as well. So basically what Dunning-Kruger effect describes is the learning process of how things are, well, basically what stages you are going through. And what it measures is the level of confidence you have and the level of competence you have. So when you go through it, there's going to be, like I said, ups and downs, right? And this is probably what every single one of us has gone through. When you start off, everything you learn is new. So you're accumulating a lot of, so let's say, self-confidence about the fact that you're learning stuff, you're starting to understand things. But then eventually every single one of us comes to this point right here, and I love the name. It's the peak of Mount Stupid. Why is it called like that? Because this is the point where you know very basic stuff, but it gives you a lot of self-confidence at first, right? So you feel like you're on top of the world and you know everything. But then you start to investigate things further and you start to understand, okay, this direction actually has 5 different paths. This one has 6 different paths. This one, I barely scratched the surface. And eventually you start to go down into the valley of despair. This is where you start to lose the self-confidence, but actually you're still learning stuff and you're building your own, knowledge base. And this is the point where a lot of people give up just because they cannot find the motivation. And this is the point where a lot of people start to find their focus. So what I did when I started to work with Power BI is I started to focus on data visualization in general. I didn't know a lot about DAX. I didn't know a lot about data modeling. That I understood that I can add that whenever I want to afterwards, but I want to focus on data visualization at first. So based on that, it allowed me to get a focus, because when you're focused, you're learning things a lot quicker and you're doing that in a controlled manner. So here, you basically start to learn new things. Then you get to this sort of point when you get on a slope of enlightenment, when you're starting to understand, this is not that bad. I'm starting to learn new things. I'm getting more confident and I know what I know. Going upwards is basically when you also learn the, let's say, the skill of saying no when you don't know something. So I usually say that this is where people are getting confident enough to say that I don't know much about this, but based on my experience, for example, I can do this and that. This is the point where you're not afraid to say that you're not an expert in everything, because one person cannot be an expert in everything that's necessary for Power BI. There are hundreds of different directions that you can go to. So you go through it and you keep on development. And the reason why this is called basically plateau stability is because your level of confidence is at its peak. You're not worried about others' opinions. You're okay with constructive criticism as long as it's, based on evidence, not just saying, hey, I didn't like it. Well, that doesn't mean anything. But the reason why it kind of flattens out is because at that point, you're not necessarily increasing your competence, but you're increasing your, not competent, but you're not increasing your confidence, but you're increasing your level of competence. So your knowledge base gets increased and you can answer a lot more things and you can do a lot of things. So this is one of the things that I usually show to the students as well. This is kind of a great way on how you can understand where on the Kruger effect curve are you actually located. I can tell from my experience, I got here in about a month or two. I spent about 2 or 3 months here. And after that, I started to go up the slope. Right now, I would say I'm right about here. I'm definitely not here. I still have a lot to learn. But I'm feeling a lot more confident about what I do, and I don't have any issues with telling my experience to anybody else. If they're telling me a different point of view, cool, tell me about it. I'm more than willing to learn about it and understand your perspective, right? So it's also important to understand these sort of things. Now, going back to the criterias and the challenges, one of the most important things I want to emphasize on is going to be this one right here. Do not forget, the deadline for the submission is going to be September 22nd. So it's this Friday. There we go, Friday. And the time for this end of the submissions is 12 a.m. UK time. Since we're in Latvia, it's going to be, for example, 2 a.m. for us when you can finally submit, when the submission process closes. So if you want to learn about the time itself, just make sure you convert the UK time to whatever, let's say, region you are currently located in. Suman is saying he's stuck in the valley. Hey man, I've been there. It sucks there, but you'll get out of it. What else is there? Quickly, for later as I have to leave, is there a way that all the text on maps is displayed in English? Thanks. Allison, so the way that the maps work is usually region-based. There is an opportunity to define that they are coming in English, but that is done on a tile level, kind of tile server level. It's not necessarily done by the visual itself. So it's just something to keep in mind. Different tile servers also provide different localization options. So yeah, the submission deadline is going to be September 22nd. Afterwards, the next week is where the judges review all the entries and pick the winner, go and understand what's possible and so forth. And of course, on the 30th of September, there's going to be a award ceremony online where we're going to congratulate the top entries, tell what's good about them and so forth. I hope that was the plan, that I just didn't ruin anything, right? But usually that's the way it goes. What else? If you keep scrolling down, you can see there's also this mini challenge by ZoomCharts. So the main thing about this one is you need to register separately for the mini challenge. And the way you do it is either by clicking on this link right here, or if you just go to our website right here at the top, there's going to be a banner where you can register. Once you open that up, you're going to have an entry form where you can register a new account at ZoomCharts so we can verify that and afterwards communicate with you. And also, if you do already have a ZoomCharts account, you can just simply use your own login information. So you don't have to register another account just because, right? Once you sign in, you're going to have an option right here. And this is what I mentioned to one of you before. You can activate a developer's license. So there's no fees associated with it whatsoever. Once you go through the terms and conditions, press on activate my license. You're going to see this window, which generates a username and a password for you that you can use to get into a Power BI account, Microsoft account basically, which has the necessary licenses provided and associated. So you can use all ZoomCharts visuals without any additional cost. But remember this little disclosure right here, right? The license in this account is meant for development purposes only. So this is meant for testing, building POCs, and these sort of things. These licenses cannot be used for commercial use. Just wanted to point it out there. Once you have an account and once you build a report, I'm going to go quickly back. And right here, we also have a submission page that I can open up. We can see I already submitted something, so I can quickly delete it and do the submission process again. Hopefully it doesn't trigger any errors or something, right? Okay, let's refresh it. And it looks like I managed to break it. It's a live session. Things are bound to happen, right? Murphy's Law. There you go. But essentially, there's going to be a form right here which you can fill up, where you can add your reports and you can submit them. Once you submit them, we're going to reach out to you after a while with a confirmation or a decline email. The reason why we're building these emails is because what we're basically going through when going through the submission process is just making sure there's no explicit content that's not supposed to be here. You know, you are undergoing all the requirements. So for example, you have ZoomCharts visuals included in the report. If you go for the mini challenge and so forth, just to make sure that you are okay and valid for all the terms and conditions that apply for the submitted process. Once you get the validation email, you're also going to get a link to a published to web version of your report, which you can afterwards easily use and share to your network within LinkedIn and so forth. This is also one of the reasons why in the form, we actually ask for your LinkedIn URL. For those of you who maybe don't know how to get it, very simple. Open up your LinkedIn account, click on view profile, and this is the link that we are looking for. So just add that to the submission form. The main reason for that is so we can afterwards tag you in the reports. So when we're posting them, you're going to get tagged as well. And also the best reports from this challenge are going to become a part of our sample gallery. And if you have provided your URL to the LinkedIn and everything, there's going to be a reference to with your name and your picture at the report itself. So it's also a great way for you to showcase your reports to other members of the community and other, for example, potential job. So it's a great way to put your name out there, like I said. Not only personal experience, but also a great way to network. Most of the submissions to Onyx Data Challenge be the same as the one for ZoomCharts Mini Challenge. No, you can submit two different versions. You can submit one version to the Onyx Data Challenge itself, and you can submit a completely different version of the report for the ZoomCharts Mini Challenge. There is no rule that you have to submit exactly the same report for both challenges. So you can build one for the Onyx data and then adapt it and submit it to ZoomCharts separately. That's completely fine. All right, looks good, right? Let's see, did I miss anything? Talked about ZoomCharts, went through the Onyx Data Challenge, talked about the mini challenge. I guess it's time to go to the report, right? All right, without further ado, let's open up the Power BI report. Let's quickly switch all the windows just so I can double check and make sure you're seeing everything that I want you to see. And let's talk about what else I did with the dataset, right? So this page was basically built with what we did in the first session, where we talked about the changes, what I did with the data and so forth. Sure, it's a little bit visually more adapted. Like, for example, I adjusted the font families, I adjusted the colorings to make it a little bit easier to navigate through and these sort of things. But there are actually a few other things that I did here. So one of the things that I did here is if I go to the query view, let's open that up. There we go. So what I did in the query view is I actually adjusted this particular query a little bit further. So in the original version, what I had is I didn't have the guest name. And the way it transposed was this, right? So for example, you have investors, and what I had initially, just to save space and so I don't have too much granularity, you can see that I had, for example, right here, different investors, but then every single guest was under the category guest. But when I played around with the visual, I decided actually could be a cool idea if I could give the opportunity for the end user to, for example, switch if he wanted to. So for example, have an expanded version of the guest list. So if he wants to see the name of the investor, he can actually have it. So what I did in the query was bring in the guest name column itself. So you can see we have a lot of empty cells, but there's also some couple of names. And right here, we also have a couple of entries. So right now it seems like it's 100% entry because I also did additional steps throughout the query itself, right? But the main idea that I did here is I essentially created two columns. One of them is going to be investor name core. That is the one that I had it previously. And this one essentially returns either the investor name, or if I load in more, or return the guest. Based on that, I created another additional column, which was created based on these rules right here. I'm going to quickly open up this window. And what I did here is essentially I created a new column, which was investor name, and then I renamed it in the file itself to all. And the main idea that I'm doing here is if the column name, investor name temporary, so that was my core, contains the name guest, then please return the guest name. And this is one thing that some of you might not know about Power BI. When you're building conditional columns, first of all, you're going to have this ABC123, which means that you're inputting a value. But if you want to, for example, reference a value that's already existing in another column from the same table, remember, you have to use this for the same table. You can't reference another table. You can actually switch this to select a column, and then you choose which column's value are you going to be referencing. So in this case, I used guest name. So essentially what I'm saying here is, hey, I want to create a new column for which the rule is the following. If you have already an existing investor name, use that. If you do find an investor name that contains the word guest in it, because there are different versions of it within the expanded column, then please return the guest name. So that gives me a new column which has all the investor names. Also the guests, because essentially they are investors as well. So if I go to the visual itself and I go to the columns, I could quickly do, for example, something like this. Remove the investor name core. So remember, here we had the guest. I remove the core and I add the all option. And you can see that now we can already see that guest is being removed. And if I go into others, previously I had only one slice here. In this case, I can start to go into more and more and more sub-levels of it and see every single investor. So that gives me the opportunity to, for example, choose a particular, industry, let's say pet products. I can see all the investors who have invested in this particular category. Previously, if I would have the core, okay, so let's just quickly refresh. Sometimes it bugs out. There you go. So now when I have the core and I go for pet products, you can see that I have the core members, but then I have a guest section. So the main reason why I did this is something that you can also think about the properties of the visualization itself. And what I did here is to help the users to basically navigate. I allow them to have both options. They can look through the group of a guest without needing to know who's the specific investor. They just know that it's a guest investor, right? He was a guest attendee for that particular episode. Or I can give them the opportunity to go through it and look at the specific name of the investor. So that's one of the things. Now, going to the new page that I created, I pretty much copy pasted the top row, but I changed a couple of the KPI cards. So what I did here is I specifically wanted to emphasize on these numbers right here. And the main reason for that is because if you look at the data itself, so if we go to Power Query and look at the full data set and find the state, pitch state, you can see that 74% only have a valid value. So 24% of the entries itself don't have any state associated to them. Okay. And if you actually filter this out by the startups that had received an investment, the number is actually pretty much like 50%. So these numbers change drastically, right? And I wanted to give the full picture to the user so he understands what and how does it look. Actually, I'm getting a message from the team that the submission form has been fixed. So let's just double check. Let's see. There we go. Let's open it up so I can actually show it to you. We register. We go to a submit page. There we go. See? It's a live session, right? Things happen. You can't always predict everything. So here we provide the name for the submission itself. So what's the name of our report? We provide a little bit of a description. I'm just going to say sample dataset or sample report. Here's my URL. Like I said, open up your profile, get the URL, paste it in, and attach a file. So in this case, I'm going to go with the workshop Onyx data, this particular report, waiting for the upload to finish, get a message that it's uploaded. Of course, there are some rules and conditions that apply to it, right? Those are the rules of the competition itself, and you click submit. There you go. So once this is done, you can see your report will undergo validation. Once it's validated, you will be informed about it. So that is covered now. Let's see. This window. I want to make sure I see everything, right? So on this page, like I said, there's going to be a lot of numbers associated with the startups and the number of deals. The main reason why I wanted to have this is so you have a full picture of the actual results. So when you, for example, start to go into percentages, and there's a particular reason why I don't show percentages here, is because they're misleading, right? So there's a total of 1,200 different startups. There's only 700 who got a deal. If only 50% of these with location, so 413 are with a location, that's okay, a little bit above 50, let's say closer to 60%. Or I'm not entirely sure. I'm not a great mathematician in my hand. That's why I have formulas. But you can see that there's a reason why this information has to be displayed. You need to inform your customer or your user that there are locations which do not have a particular state associated with them. And there are a few things that you could do with them. You could, of course, for example, completely filter out this page by going to filter on this page and say that apply, for example, a state and say, I only want to see the information about the deals which have all the necessary information. Okay? Or you create a way for the end user to do this by interacting with the report itself. And what I did here is I created two different visuals. So I built a map visual. And for the map visual, you're going to notice that you need a longitude and a latitude. Latitude and longitude. Reverse. Scratch it, right? But you need this information. So the ZoomCharts map visual needs to have a latitude and longitude. If you look at the original data set itself, we do have a state. We do have a city, for example. Where was it? US viewership, a little bit backwards. There we go. We have a city and we have a state. But there's no long lat. So what I need to do, I need to get a longitude and latitude, right? Because you're not limited to the data set that you're using. You can always add additional information on top of it to get to the wanted result. So what I did here is I didn't want to go into too much detail, but I wanted to at least get the information on a state level. And one of the easiest ways on how you can do this, if you need a longitude and latitude for states in USA, because this is where our investments are happening in this case, you can simply do this, right? Type in lat long sample for US states. And you can see there's a few options that you find. The one that I'm usually using is this one. been doing this for a while and getting used to this one. You just get this one. You can see there's an abbreviation for the state, there's a name, there's a longitude and a latitude. So you basically just copy and paste this one. You go back to your Power BI and you add this information just as a regular table. So you just paste it in. So you have your state, latitude and longitude, and also the name. Once you add this table, don't forget about one important aspect of it. In order for Power BI to understand this information and actually that there's a connection, always double check if you have created a relationship between them. So in this case, you can see what I did is I connected the geo table, which was basically the state information that I got from Google. I connected it through the state code, which was the abbreviation, because in the original data source, we also had states. If we go here, there we go, state. You can see we have different states. Sure, there are some exceptions, like for example, there's a startup from Canada, but most of them have an abbreviation or we have these blank values. So I connected the code to the picture state. You can see these two values getting highlighted. Then I went and started to use the information from both of the tables. So I'm using the latitude and longitude from the geographical table, and I'm using the state name also from the geo table. That helps me to, for example, when I call out a tooltip, I can actually understand what it is, right? I'm not a Native American, so I don't know all the states. I know the typical ones that I come across, but I'm not super proficient in the geography of US. I can probably get lost in Latvia as well, is where I've lived for 30 years. So, you know, ain't the best one. But what that allows me to do is to create a basic visual. And one other thing that I did here is, so for example, if I remove this one, let's actually do this. Give me a second. Let's actually build one from scratch. So this is the end result. How we built it. We created a map visual. Just going to build one, right? So we're adding the latitude and the longitude. So that gives me this information right here. It tells me how many investments are in the particular location or how many times these locations are being noticed. Then I'm going to say that, hey, the value that I want to see on top of the map is actually going to be the investment amount. Okay, we can already start to see some bigger numbers. Cool. I can then go and say I want to make these under formatting options node settings. I can say, okay, I actually want to make these a little bit bigger. Yeah, minimum radius could be a 10. So I can see them a little bit better, right? I can, of course, change the fill colors. I can change the fonts and so forth. And that's what I'm actually going to be doing here. I'm going to change these ones to black. And now one very cool feature that we have within the map visual is the ability to showcase pie charts on top of the map itself. The reason for the pie charts is because it allows you to see another dimension that wasn't previously there. So for example, if you scroll lower, you can find a field called category. And in the category, I'm going to drop in investors, let's say core, just so I have fewer options. You can see when I first drop in, nothing really happens. Why is that? Because if I go to formatting options, node settings, and scroll down a bit, you can see that pie charts on nodes are disabled by default. So you have to enable them. Once you enable them, you can see these pie charts are being drawn. And what's cool about them is the very first setting right here is cluster node distance. So this is distance in relative proximity. And what it allows me to do is, for example, to define a bigger radius around the node to kind of cluster together, to capture them together and to showcase them as one single point. If you want to see the underlying points itself, you can turn this on aggregated node highlight. And now when I hover over, you can see it shows me from where the points are being captured. So it shows me the boundaries. Now, what's also cool about this is once you start to zoom in, for example, if I start doing this, you can see these donuts are actually splitting up. And that's because the relative distance is changing. So this allows you, like I said, to have that initial overview, but you can get into details once you start to investigate a particular region of US, for example. You can, of course, select these by just clicking on one of the center nodes. You can hold Control to select multiple. Or another cool thing that you can do here is right here at the bottom left, it's covered kind of by the map. You can see it right now a little bit better. There's a tool called Lasso Tool. And once you enable it, you can actually draw whatever shape you want on top of the map. And you can use that as a filter. So that collects the points within the boundaries. So there's a lot of cool features and things that you can do with the map. But for this particular case, what else we did is we wanted to make sure that the map itself doesn't look too colorful. And I'll explain why. The second visual we had here on the side was a network visual. That's a waterfall. Close enough, Aivis. There's the network. So what we have in the network visual is we had the investor name, then we had the state name, and we had from startups the industry. And they're all measured by the investment amount. Okay, let's see if it's the right version. It's the AppSource version, correct? So, and you can kind of start seeing why I wanted to change this, right? We can see there's a lot of different colors going on, basically starting to look like a rainbow. And especially if you have colors similar here and colors similar here. So for example, if I go to customization itself and I say, for example, this one's gonna be, let's say, I don't know, in a yellow color, the same color palette as here. Category 2 is gonna be, for example, something else, gonna be the purple one. Category 3 is gonna be, let's say, the orange one. So you can see these colors, they repeat itself. And what this initially gives me as a story is that, the colors should usually be associated. So the first thing that I'm reading here is, hey, this is actually connected to this. But in reality, if I look at it, this is Mark Cuban. All the yellow nodes here are all the individual investors. So it's not really the same information, which is one of the reasons why the capability that we added to the map visual, or to the donut specifically, is you can go under node settings, you can scroll down and find at the very bottom where you talk about the pies itself. There's this setting right here called base fill color. And what it allows you to do is to choose a color which depicts the original color, and the rest of the slices are going to be a lighter version of that color. So now, if I change these settings around here a little bit, I'm going to add a legend so it's a little bit easier for you guys. So for example, right now, purple is state name. So I'm just going to turn them around right here. So it's just a little bit more sense, right? So now I can understand that investors are going to be in purple. So I'm talking about investors in this specific use case. If these would be industries, I would make it orange. If these would be states, which is irrelevant since you're already using a map, that would be in yellow. So always try to build something that allows the user to understand, what am I looking at, right? Sure, I completely agree with you. Sometimes you want to make a visual or, a report that just looks nice. So all these colors and popping things, they look cool, but at the very end, it's not necessarily beneficial for the storytelling part of it. So that's why you want to make sure that if you have a value that you reference in multiple visuals, that it's the same color. It's the same principle we used here. You can see we're using investment amount in all of these. Hence, the color for all of them is exactly the same. I could, for example, disable the base color was also used here. So I could say, yeah, I actually don't want to use it, right? And I could keep these popping colors. But it kind of stands out. It doesn't fit in with the core color palette, or, okay, yeah, I could adjust the colors and everything, but I think you get the point, right? It stands out. It doesn't really correlate directly to the same value. So you're starting to think that this is showcasing something a little bit different. And that is what you're trying to avoid. So what we did here is adjusted the colors, made sure that the color here, investors, is the same as here. So whenever you're looking at it, it's a lot easier to understand it. The other thing that I did here is I created a separate value for all of those locations, or basically all those startups that do not have a location. Because remember, we have 413 with location, 352 without location. So I wanted to give an opportunity for the end user to decide whether he wants to see those undisclosed locations as well, or if he wants to focus only on those that have location. And here what I did is I played around with bookmarks, and I allowed the user to go, for example, right now you can see this one is active, so with undisclosed, and we can see this is the point where all undisclosed investments are. It might seem that it's somewhere on Africa, but it's actually somewhere in the middle of the ocean because the coordinates are 0, 0. It's just the location I provided. I could theoretically, of course, add it right here, somewhere, for example, in the middle, but I just decided to go with 0, 0. So if a user wants to, he can switch to this and have all the information, or he can switch to undisclosed is disabled, and then I can focus only on the information that has a location. So that narrows down the number, and hence these KPI cards right here, right? It's because if you filter out the undisclosed, there's no reason for this card to have a number, hence it's saying 0. If you would have it, then it also shows a number, how many locations actually do not have it. Because when you start to investigate it, for example, I could have a selection, let's say, for California. I know where California is, guys. There you go. Select California, and we can see that all the investments here do have a location. There's actually 210 startups that submitted their ideas from Cali, 126 from them got a deal. If I go to a different route, for example, I have the network here on the side, which connects the investor to state to industry. And let's say the industry is the yellow part, right? So I'm interested in a specific industry. Let's say this one. This one seems to be the biggest node. So what it is, food and beverage. All right, I zoom in so I can read it and see the value. I click on it. You can see it filters out. So I have 166 investments in total. 84 of them have a location, 82 of them don't have a location. And I can see the total number even. So the one that has location doesn't have, the one that doesn't have location, there were 28 million invested in total. Whereas these ones, there's a bit of a separation here. So if you have 3, 10, 6, and 6 million. What else? The size of the nodes. This is one thing that I cannot emphasize on too much. Always play around with them. So for example, in this particular view, right, I could go here and say, actually, I want this to be, okay, we can have it at 40, but these ones are very small. So I want to have them a little bit bigger. So increase the minimum node radius. Okay, looks better. If I start to zoom in, okay, still looks good. They're not overlapping. Perfect. But then I remove the selection from the network, and there's a lot more information, so more states are coming in. All right, we can see there's a little bit of an overlap right here. I zoom in, looks good. Okay, they adjusted. This one looks okay. Perfect. But if I make the max node radius a bit bigger, so let's say 50, or even bigger, let's say 70, you can see that these things are starting to overlap. So what you're trying to always avoid is that behavior that doesn't allow the user to see the information clearly. So these are small little things, but you always focus on them to make sure that you make the storytelling element for the end user a lot quicker and easier. So the main things that I did here is I created a map which has the information regarding the locations based on the investor. I'm gonna adjust these settings back to the original, otherwise I'm gonna finish on a funky looking chart. There we go. So there's the network. I added different KPIs so it always tells the story of what type of information is displayed. I added a bookmark switch, which is a bookmark navigator that allows me to switch between with the undisclosed location or without it. I have a map chart which allows me to look at the information geographically split by the investor. And I also have a network chart, which, for example, if I choose a particular investor, shows me the way that Mark Cuban actually invests. So this allows me to see all the industries and all these particular states that he's investing in. One thing that you can actually also do here is if you think that, okay, that's actually a bit too much information, I just want to focus on Mark Cuban and see what states he invests in. Sure, you can actually do this and just select one particular node. And you can see that Mark Cuban actually kind of focuses on this area. It might seem like that, but it's not really that because we made a selection from already filtered view. In reality, he makes investments all across US and also some undisclosed locations. Actually, undisclosed locations is 30M, so a lot of the startups don't really want to tell where they're originating from, I guess. But you never know, right? I didn't collect the data. I don't know the story behind it. Maybe it was never a prerequisite, or maybe it was added after a certain season. So that's something you can guys actually look into and maybe provide as an answer, right? Saying that, for example, this view is only applicable to data that's after season 6. Maybe. I don't know if that's the case. But yeah, I hope it was interesting for you guys. I hope you learned something new. And I guess we can move on to the Q&A session. So let me just open up the Q&A list and see what have I missed. So how can you include the legend for the donut chart on the map? The various colors in the donut might be confusing for our viewers. You cannot add a legend currently for the map itself. Currently, because there are too many items that have to be, let's say, added as a part of the legend. We do have plans to add legend as is later, not later this year. I think it's a project for next year. But one of the ways on how you can work around this is if you go actually to our sample gallery. Let me just open up ZoomCharts website right here. Report examples. I'm going to quickly paste this in the chat as well. So if you find this one right here, so sales overview report, you can open up this one. And I took a little bit of a different approach. There's a reason for that as well, because I actually wanted to provide a bit more information for each of the categories that are available in the graph. So I'm going to open up. Actually, I can send you guys this link as well in the chat if somebody wants to open it specifically. So what we did here is, you can see there's a map with different categories. And what I did here on the side is I created a table which has one cell that is colored based on the same as the original in the map. So if I wanted to, I could theoretically just click on one of the specific categories and that filters out the information on the other side. Or if I click on a particular category, not category, but for example, region right here, you can see that filters out the information on the table. So it allows you to cross-filter information in different dimensions. The reason why I wanted to add it as a table is because when you're looking at a map, it's really hard to depict, for example, the increase or the growth in a particular measurement. So in this case, I wanted to see what's the growth rate for sales, right? Having it in a table, I think you guys can agree with me that this is a lot more convenient, where I can see specifically what category, what are the total sales, what is the sale increase or decrease comparison to the previous year. So if I want to compare multiple categories and see where they're located on the map, I can simply hold Control and select those categories and have donut charts update that information and showcase it. I hope that answers your question, Luna. If it doesn't, let me know. I'll try to swim around it and provide a different answer. All right. Any other questions? Anything you guys noticed that you want to ask about regarding the challenge itself, regarding the visuals, regarding what I built here, anything? You know, it's always more interesting if you make it more of a dialogue than rather just me talking and, you know, going through general things. I always love to have a discussion with the audience itself. Come on. I don't believe that you guys don't have any questions. Come on. Don't be shy. You can ask even the simplest questions, you know, just give me an opportunity to say something rather than just try to fill in the air. All right. Well, people are thinking about it and saying, one of the things that you will also get after the webinar is, remember, you're gonna have a recording. So tomorrow you're gonna have an email with the recording link to this session, so you can rewatch it if you have to jump up, or if you know somebody who wasn't able to join for today, so you can easily send them the link. That's one thing. And you're also gonna have this sample report itself attached as an example. So you're going to be able to download the PBIX file and play around with it and see what it did with the data and with the visuals and so forth. So that's going to be available there. Just wanted to put it out there. All right, there. See, now you go. There are the questions. So John said, can you show how to change the font style in the visual like for the X and Y axis? Sure. I'm guessing we're going to be talking about one of these, where you actually have an X and Y axis, right? So in order to change the font family, you go into the formatting options, you choose the property that you want to change, or let's say the element that you want to change, let's say the y-axis. And right here where you have the font family, this is actually a free text field. So you can type in the font family, just as an example, Times New Roman. You can see that adjusted the font family. So it's just a free text field where you input the value of the font family name. Cas Libri. Yeah, sure. That's a family now. For example, Arial. And so forth. All right. Suman, this is great, but this has been done manually, the color selection. About which part of it? If you can specify, Suman. Meanwhile, I'm going to the next one. I tried Segua, but it won't change. Yeah, Segua and DIN fonts are unfortunately not yet supported within our visuals. The main reason for that is because these are Microsoft proprietary fonts, which are not allowed to be used by third-party vendors. We are talking with Microsoft to see how we can, kind of get to a common ground to it, because at the end of the day, we're providing a service within their platform. We're not going outside it. So eventually it is coming, John, but unfortunately right now, that is one of the limitations. Can you use custom maps for the map visual? Sure. So for example, when you're using a map visual, if you go to the formatting options, you have a few things that you can do here. You can actually play around with the shape layers, and the shape layers work as following. The shape layers typically are shapes on the map itself, right? So for example, I could have a map without really having a map. And one of the things that you can do here is play around with the min and max zoom levels. So for example, I can say that shape 2 layer, which was the country, is going to be available till level 3, but the state level is going to start from level 3. So what this does is, if I'm, did I mess it up? Minimum is, oh yeah, I messed up. So 0 to 3. So if I zoom out, you can see I have the countries of the world. If I start to zoom in closer on US, I get the state plus the country. If I zoom in a little bit closer, I remove the country shapes and focus on the state shapes. And a similar thing you can also do with the base layers. So you can actually use Azure maps, you can use custom maps. So by default, you're using OpenStreetMaps, but you can actually provide any tile server that's out there. If it needs a public license or anything, you have an API key field here that you can add to it. But this allows you to use CartoDB maps, Azure maps, Google maps, Bing maps, whatever you want to use, get the tile server URL and paste it in here. So Suman mentioned the previous one, the legend section. Yeah, it is a bit of a manual work, but not every single report is super automatic. A lot of the things that you're going to notice is people are doing a lot of things manually to get the wanted result. All right, what else? Is it possible to develop a butterfly chart using ZoomCharts? Butterfly chart. Let's refresh my memory. What was a butterfly? Not a video. Let's go for images. So sort of a tornado. It's called the butterfly chart, tornado chart. There's, I think, different analytical words for it. To a certain extent, let's say like that. You can use for example, the combo chart or the timeline, depending. The timeline is not going to be possible because only have a horizontal timeline. But the combo chart is one of the options you can use here. And the way you would do it is essentially have one series that go in a positive value range, the other one that goes into negative value range. You would switch the y-axis to be centered, and then you would use the ability to format the values that Power BI allows you and actually convert negative values into positive values. So that would create a visual effect that the axis is going in positive both ways. It's a bit of a manual setup, but you can definitely achieve this. Previous one, legend section. So is there any font collection that only support in Zoom? I don't think there's a specific list that we developed, but usually the ones that you have typically available in any website, or unless it's a custom font, those are usually supported. What else is there? Can you show a bit of the graph visual? We could add them, of course, but I think that's going to take a bit more time. One thing that I can definitely recommend you to do is, I don't know if you have looked at it or not yet, Adam, is the Academy. Let me just bring the screen in. So we have academy.zoomcharts.com, which is a free resource where you can find, for example, the graph visual. And it's a course basically where I go through most important things about the visual. So you have like things, overview, initial setup, interactions, navigation, legends, nodes. So most of the important formatting options are going to be described or covered in one way or shape or form. If there's anything missing, do let us know about it. And then you can just, reach out to us and we can send you back more information regarding a specific topic. I do agree. It's maybe not the easiest to get into, but it's very powerful. That's what I can say. Is it possible? Yeah, it's a great experience. No, I'm not going to, vote on our own library. That would be cheating. Is it possible to develop yeah, that one I answered. Alimi says, thanks for the webinar. Great and insightful. Hey, happy to help you guys, right? Usually what I say is the main goal for me for participating in any workshop, in any webinar, is to provide information at the very end. I hope that this was interesting and you managed to learn something new and actually useful. Because learning something new is very simple. I said it the last time as well, right? I could say something like, I don't know, my height is 120 centimeters. Did you learn something? Yeah. Was it useful? Probably not. So my main goal is always to bring something that you find interesting and useful. All right. I think we covered actually all of the questions. Great. I don't know about you guys, but I feel good about myself. If there's nothing else, the last thing I want to say is thanks again, guys, for joining today's workshop. And I hope you to see in our next adventure, where we're going to be hosting a challenge for a different data set, right? You have to keep things going. All right, guys. Thank you so much for the attention. Thanks for spending the time and trusting me with your time, right? Most valuable resource. Other than that, really have nothing else to say. Then have a great rest of the day. Oh, yeah. I forgot. Sorry about that. Thanks. Admins, have to reply on the support of the colleagues. Please do not forget to fill in this little survey right here, which is for feedback collection. It's going to help us to understand what is good, what was bad, what you were missing, what you liked about the webinar, and so forth. It just helps us to understand what can be improved upon to get or to deliver as much as possible to you guys. So make sure you spend, just a couple of minutes to provide us with the feedback. That helps us tremendously to improve the quality of the webinars. Completely forgot about it. It happens to the best of us, right? Okay, I mean, so all the criterias are going to be right here. So if you open up, let me find what was right here. So you can register for it, judging criterias, terms and conditions, where you can go through and make sure that, you know, there's a detailed explanation about every scoring criteria, the requirements and everything. But if I'm not mistaken, I don't want to, you know, look like a fool now, but I'm pretty sure that there wasn't a requirement for pages. Ah, there's a search here. Okay. There's a search, but it's, there we go. Information about the page. All I see is that just reference to the word pages, but nothing that defines specifically how many pages you need to have. I could be wrong there, so just double check and go through the criteria. Yeah, I'm getting a message from the team as well. The number of pages is not limited, so it can also be a one-pager. Please share the link. Ah, of course. There you go. That's where you can find all the criteria. All right, I guess we can wrap it up. If nothing else urgent. Team, did I forget anything? Hopefully not, but just, you know, double checking. Can't run these shows alone, right? You have to have a team at the back. They're the core of everything. Thanks to them, we have these amazing events. I guess if I'm not getting any urgent messages. Submission and participation links. So for the Onyx data challenge, it's this link right here. Or if you want to participate in the ZoomCharts mini challenge, it's going to be this link right here. All right. Of course, yeah, don't forget to follow us on social media. That's actually one of the criteria, I think, right? How to enter. Yeah, you have to follow ZoomCharts on LinkedIn. All right, guys. Thank you so much for the time, and I'll see you in the next event. Bye, everyone.